Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Finland once again, and we're going to have a look at yet another of the beers that arrived in Riku box number 2. So first and foremost, a massive shout out and thank you to Riku Sanaxinaho, my Finnish beer mule living in Oulu in the northwest of Finland, and it's thanks to him that you guys are getting to enjoy a steady stream of Finnish reviews here on the channel. As I've told you in previous reviews, there are some great Finnish craft beers out there these days, but trying to get a hold of these from outside of Finland is a little bit of a nightmare, and it seems that Riku has his own beer mule network set up within Finland that he uses to get things from all across the country, and then he passes some of them on to me, of course, which is great. So Riku, massive thank you to you once again for making this review and all the other Finnish ones possible, and I hope that you guys watching these videos are enjoying seeing these Finnish beers reviewed, because it's not something that you come across every day. Also, a special shout out to the Finnish men's national football team, who are in the Euros for the very first time ever. So yeah, they've played all 3 of their games. Fingers crossed the results go their way and they get through to the knockout stages as one of the best third teams in the group. So yeah, hopefully that can happen for them. Scotland, of course, are unfortunately out now, but it's a young team and I'm sure we'll come back stronger over the next little while. We've got a good manager, but good luck to Finland going forward as well. Awesome country with lovely people in my experience. But yeah, for this review then, we are going to have a look at a beer from another brewery that I've never come across before. So we're going to go to the southwest of Finland, to a little village called Mathildedalin, and we're having a look at my first beer from Mathildedalin Kyläpanimo. So this particular beer is called Fredrik. It comes in at 10% ABV, and this one is a Belgian-style quadruple. So yeah, really curious to see how this one turns out. When Riku and I were discussing what beers to put in the box, I can't remember, it was me that found this beer. And he was really surprised that there was a brewery in Finland who were doing a quadruple. So he somehow managed to get a hold of this one. But this was a suggestion that I made to Riku, and he was able to pull it off. So again, big ups to Riku for making this review possible. But yeah, very curious to see how it turns out. I've not had a quadruple from Finland before, so fingers crossed it's as good as the other beers we've had from Finland, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So let's go for it. The Fredrik Quadruple, 10% ABV from Mathildedalin Kyläpanimo in the southwest of Finland. So yeah, let's crack on then. As always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Mathildedalin Kyläpanimo. This is the very first time that I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Finnish beers that I've reviewed for you, and that's being added to whenever I have the opportunity from the Riku beers. We probably will need another box at some point later in the year, but we'll see how that goes. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Mathildedalin Kyläpanimo, and I do apologise for any bad Finnish pronunciations, still getting my head round the sort of phonics and things with this language, but yeah. Mathildedalin Kyläpanimo, these guys are based in the small village of Mathildedalin in southwest Finland, which you'll find about halfway between Helsinki to the east and Turku to the west. So this village is very small. It only has about 100 permanent residents, and it was formed around an ironworks back in the 1850s. But today it's part of the city of Salo next to the Teijo National Park. But the brewery itself was founded by a group of people in the village back in 2014, but the 2 main men behind driving this brewery in the early days were Pauli Saurelius and Tuomo Holm. So the village actually has many small artisan businesses, but when Tuomo suggested that they make their own beer, the idea was received very enthusiastically by a number of the villagers, and so a new brewery building was constructed in the middle of the town. So Tuomo went to study brewing after this, and he was the original brewer, while Pauli was taking care of the business side of things. And he's involved in a number of the committees within the town itself, actually, from what I understand as well. But when the brewery opened, they were producing 20 to 30,000 litres of beer per year. In more recent times, though, Tuomo has stepped back from brewing to get more involved in other businesses within the town, and the brewing has been taken over by Patrick Erevara, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. But he studied brewing and distilling at Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh, which seems to be a very common route for craft brewers to get into the market these days, which is pretty cool. Many breweries that I review here on the channel have Heriot-Watt graduates there. But these days, Mathildedalin Kyläpanimo are producing around 50,000 litres of beer per year, most of which is bottled. As I've explained to you in previous Finnish reviews, the Finns seem to have a sort of bandied tax system when it comes to craft breweries and distilleries and things, and it's based on their annual production. So what you tend to find is that breweries will get to a certain amount and stay there for quite a long time, and 50,000 litres, if memory serves me correctly, is one of the bands. And I think quite a few breweries tend to brew 180,000 litres as well, actually, but I think they are starting to liberalise the laws even further. Finland have actually been quite active in liberalising their laws in recent years, from what I understand, to help the artisanal alcohol producers. But apparently the stronger beers are only sold at the brewery. Many of the others are sold in local supermarkets and bars and things like this, and they've got one IPA that goes through Alko, which is the Finnish alcohol monopoly. But as of June 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 50 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and my reason behind choosing this one was just that it's the only Finnish quadruple that I've managed to find. So yeah, it was quite an interesting find, this one, because when I showed this to Riku, he had no idea about this brewery and that anyone was brewing a quadruple. I think the reason it came up in discussion was I just asked him if there was any. I said we hadn't had too many Belgian-style beers in the Finnish box, and he said he didn't think anyone did them, and I managed to find this one, pardon me, and I think one of his friends was able to pick it up and get it up to him in Oulu, and then he of course sent it on to me. So this one is quite a nice one to be able to review for you, my very first Belgian quadruple from Finland. So yeah, awesome stuff. But that is all I can really tell you about Mathildedalin Kyläpanimo for the moment. If you want to learn a little bit more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, that's it for the moment. So we'll get on and actually have a little taste of this beer then. I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open up. As you can see, there is the Mathildedalin Kyläpanimo symbol there. It looks, it's weird, you know, whenever I look at this symbol, back home in Scotland, they have these things that they use to cover phone masts, and they really remind me of that. It really reminds me of that. So they actually make phone masts in Scotland look like pine trees, and the symbol that these guys are using for the brewery reminds me a little bit of that. But I think it's quite nice. It's quite a modern style of artwork, but I like the fact that they've got the kind of hills and stuff there in the background. The letters are modelled to look like the hills and stuff, so it's quite a cool little graphic they've got there. But yeah, the tree in this one, it just reminds me a little bit of those those kind of fake trees that we have in Scotland that cover the phone masts. I don't know why, that is what popped into my head. But the thing that's quite cool about the artwork on these bottles is that you always get pictures from different parts of the village on them, which I think is pretty cool. And that is the name. It's basically the Mathildedalin Village Brewery, if you want to call it that. But you can see plain white bottle cap on this one. The artwork is pretty straightforward, as you can see, but I think it works. It's really cool, this one. But yeah, like I said to you at the start of the video, this one is a 10% Belgian-style quadruple and 330ml bottle. I'm not sure exactly what I paid for this one. Riku did send me a price list, but I've lost the link for that. But I think we paid something in the region of like €6 or €6.50 or something for this bottle. And when you consider that it's Finland, Finland is the most expensive country that uses the euro, then I'm not averse to paying that kind of thing for a Finnish beer. You know, these beers are kind of novelties for me, of course. But yeah, 330ml bottle, this one, quadruple, coming in at 10% ABV. Which is right in the range of what you would expect for this beer style. But let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Really curious to see what this beer has in store for us. So, out and into the glass. Yeah. I'll need to have a little look at the brewery again later and see what else they actually have. I've got a feeling that they had a triple as well, so it might be quite interesting to try their triple and see how that one goes down. Yeah, there we are. There we are. So let me just line this up again so that my OCD is happy, and there we are. So before the head disappears, you can see that this beer is poured with about a 1/3 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of fawny coloured head on this one. It looks really quite nice. Just in the centre, it's faded away to be a very, very thin foamy layer, but that foamy ring around the edge of the glass is going to sit there for quite a while. If we shine the light through this beer, it's got a lovely sort of chestnutty colour to it. I think it looks very nice. I think to you guys on the camera, it's actually appearing a little bit darker there, but if you put the light through this beer, it's got a lovely, quite bright chestnut colour to it actually. But yeah, there's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the surface there, but overall it looks pretty nice. And you know, in terms of a quadruple, there's not too much in the way of there's nothing really strange about this one in terms of the colour of it. You will get ones that are a little bit darker than this, you'll get ones that are a little bit lighter than this one. This one's pretty much right in the middle of the spectrum in my experience, but I like that lovely colour that it has. It looks absolutely looks absolutely great. Getting a bit of a dry throat, guys, but yeah, interesting. And it's interesting as well that this one doesn't maintain the head. It really just depends from brewery to brewery and recipe to recipe whether the beer, I think, is going to maintain the head as well. I think the bottle conditioning can play a little bit of a role in it as well, but then again, most Belgian style beers are bottle conditioned and the alcohol content will vary very slightly. But yeah, when it comes to the colour of your beers, remember that the colour of the beer is determined by 1, the type of malts that you use, that usually determines the magnitude of the colour, 2, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar's caramelised, thus you get a darker colour of beer. I'm not sure how long a wort boil they would use for a quadrupel, so if you know that, let me know in the comment section below. It's not a style that I've ever tried to homebrew, so I would be curious to know that. But adjuncts and barrel aging, of course, will play a role in determining the colour of the beer as well. And adjuncts and the barrel aging can both affect these beers, but usually what they do with quadruples and triples is that they put a bit of brewing sugar in them. So with these beers, that's why you often find the mouthfeel is a little bit lighter than, for example, an imperial stout of a similar ABV. It's because they put a bit of brew sugar in them as well, and it usually gives you a little bit more of a kind of active carbonation as well. But yeah, in terms of the colour of this beer, like I say, kind of right in the middle of the spectrum for me, potentially leaning a little bit towards the brighter side of things, but like we said, a lovely kind of chestnut colour, but certainly nothing out of the ordinary in terms of appearance for this beer when we consider what style it is. But yeah, I think that takes us to about time for the aroma of this one then, so let's take a closer look at that. Now that does smell quite nice. Straight away, I'm going to say that this beer, it comes across as quite, there's a good bit of like that sort of phenolic cough syrupy fruit coming out of this one, but it's also got quite a woody and leathery backbone to it, which is kind of interesting. This one does smell a wee bit different to other quadruples that I've come across before. I might have this one just a little touch cold, but I did leave it sitting out for a little while just to let it warm up a little bit, because these beers, you probably need at least 8 degrees on these to kind of enjoy them properly. I think my fridge was set about, I think the fridge is about 6 degrees, so I left it out for a good wee bit just to let it warm up. So I'm not sure exactly what temperature it will be just now. It says here on the side, served between 10 and 12 degrees, and I think for quadruples, yeah, you do want those to kind of open up a little bit more. But certainly in terms of the aroma, this one, and the temperature will affect the aroma a little bit, I think. But with this one, like I say, it's got this big woody kind of leathery backbone to it, and it's got a little bit of that kind of phenolic, fruity kind of thing going on, a wee bit of that cough syrupy medicinal thing. But let's try and break this down a wee bit more succinctly and describe it for you. But yeah, the aroma of that beer is really interesting. So certainly the backbone of the beer comes across as being quite smooth for sure. You can smell a little bit of a kind of woody quality in there and some leathery notes, but there's a lot. There is a good little bit of a kind of brown bready sort of thing and a bit of a kind of bread crusty quality, which I can certainly appreciate. So yeah, I like how that I do like how that goes together in this beer for sure. yeah, so lovely big kind of brown bready notes in this one. Yeah, they're kind of sitting on top of that kind of woody leathery sort of thing. It does give you a wee bit of a kind of rye bready grainy type element as well, but yeah, the notes that you get out of this one, I think, the notes that you get out of this are very, very nice, come to think of it. This one's got a real depth to it, and it's got quite a different vibe actually from a number of the other quadruples that I've come across in recent times. But it's been a wee while, I think, since I've reviewed one of this style. I actually couldn't tell you what the last one was, but yeah, the backbone of this one is quite interesting. Within those bready notes, you do get a wee bit more of a kind of doughy, yeasty kind of element to it, and you would always expect that. For me, Belgian style beer, it is all about the yeast. But then you've got quite a nice kind of brown sugary note coming out of this one. Just going by the aroma, what I would say about this beer as well is that the brown sugars come across as being quite highly caramelised. So I do wonder if there's a wee bit of a longer boil going on in this one, because you can smell with those sugars, they come across just really thick and really oily, and there's a bit of that darker kind of brown sugary element coming out of this one. So I do like how that pieces together in this particular beer. But yeah, definitely some more highly caramelized treacly molasses sort of thing. There's a wee bit of a kind of sweeter caramel in there, and potentially a little bit of a kind of lighter biscuity quality. So I really like how that goes together. Actually, and as I say, underneath this you get a bit of a woody kind of leathery sort of thing, and I think there's one or two little nutty elements to this one. But the more and more that you smell of it, you actually start to get a bit more of the kind of bready, yeasty sort of thing. So I think that's really interesting with this one too. Like I say, this beer, when your nose adjusts to it, you start to get more and more out of it. So the more that you smell of it, the more you're going to get the yeasty, kind of doughy, brown bready sort of things. But underneath, definitely some wood and some leather in there. A few nutty elements also. Big caramelised brown sugars in there. A little bit of treacle, as I say, and a wee bit of a kind of biscuity, cookie kind of element to it as well. I'm never sure whether to use the British English or the American English when we're reviewing these beers, because if I say biscuits to the American viewers, of course that's these little scone type things, but I guess it's more I like a sort of cookie McVitie's digestive biscuit kind of thing to me. So yeah, the aroma out of this one on the malty side of things is what you would expect actually. So yeah, some of these, the other thing as well to remember this is that some of these kind of phenolic fruity notes that are coming out of the beer, they will be coming from the addition of the brew sugar, so bear that in mind. But on the hoppy side of things, it is kind of what you would expect. There's a little bit of a kind of smooth earthiness to the beer, a little bit of a herbal quality as well, but you've also got some nice kind of floral aromatic notes coming into the beer, and you've also got a bit of a lighter sort of grassy side of things to this one as well. Usually in these kind of beer styles, I think what they tend to do is use a hop, like a Hallertau Tettnanger, a Czech Sats Žatec, or like a Slovenian Styrian Golding, something like this. They tend to use a noble hop, a noble type hop in these beers. The Quadrupel, of course, is not the most hop forward of styles. The other hop that they might use in these would be the Northern Brewer from Germany, which is quite popular for Doppelbocks actually. I do wonder how many breweries use that one, but yeah, this one, it does have that kind of typical noble hop type quality to it, so I wouldn't be surprised if it is something like Czech Sats, Slovenian Styrian Golding, or one of the German Hallertau or Tettnanger type hops that are in this one of the lower alpha acid ones, or could be a German Northern Brewer. But yeah, the green component of this one has certainly got a bit of that brightness that you'd expect of a German noble hop, I would say. But any of those ones that I mentioned, I think could be feasible candidates for this beer. But yeah, smooth earthiness, a little bit of a bright floral note, and a wee bit of a brighter grassy zestiness there, which I think is great. But on the fruity side of things then, this is kind of interesting. So the backbone of the fruity part of the beer comes across as quite cakey, a little bit of a kind of Christmas puddingy sort of thing, but sitting on top of that, you do get a little bit of a kind of sharper raisiny element to it. There's some sort of plummy and pruny notes kind of sitting underneath that too, and these are quite common things to find in a quadruple. But you've got this, as I say, the cakiness that sits in there underneath the kind of the prunes and stuff like that. It gives you a little impression of it gives you a bit of an impression of like that kind of dried fruity type quality, which I really like. But yeah, on the how would you say, on the very tip of the nose, if you like, you do get a bit of a kind of more figgy, blackcurranty and slightly oily blackberry note out of this one. But yeah, quite a dried, cakey, prune fruity, cough syrupy type note out of the aroma of this one. I always like looking at these beers a little bit more for the aroma, but I think it is about time that we tried this one now. The aroma, this is lovely. Take a bit of time to ponder over, as I always say. But yeah, and let's get stuck into this one then. Bit of a brain fart there. So yeah, this one is the Fredrik, a 10% quadruple from the Mathildedalin Kyläpanimo in Mathildedalin in southwest Finland. Thank you again to Riku for making this review possible. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers, and keepis. There we go. Oh yeah, that's nice actually. I'm going to say again, it's got quite a bit of a different vibe to other quadruples that I've come across in recent times, but I like that beer. I like that beer. It reminds me a little bit of the Castile Donker that I've had. It reminds me a little bit more of that, and I would say that overall, just on that first taste, it is, you know, it's quite woody, it's a little bit leathery, and it's a bit lighter as well actually. It does feel a little bit lighter than some of the other quadruples that I've had. But the other thing you have to remember is that this is a Nordic beer, and one of the things you always, at least in my experience, tend to find with Nordic beers is that they're very clean. You know, the water you feel in these things, it can affect, it affects the mouthfeel so much obviously, and a lot of the time with Nordic beers they can just feel very, very clean. So you get the same flavour profile, but the beer just feels a little bit lighter and a little bit cleaner because of the water, and you can feel that in this beer as well. So it's definitely a full flavoured quadruple, no doubt about that, but it just feels that little touch lighter and not quite as, you know, fluffy and airy almost, if you like, as you might find from other quadruples. But it's pretty solid actually. It's an interesting one, this, for sure. But yeah, I'll say straight away, I wouldn't hesitate to drink this one again, and I would like to try a few. On the basis of this, I would be curious to try one of their lighter Belgian-style beers, like the Triple, actually. But yeah, this beer, the way this one evolves into the aftertaste is also really interesting. So let's try and just break that down for you a little bit more. So straight away across the middle of your palate, then you can feel that nice smooth sort of bready backbone to the beer. So the backbone of this beer is definitely a kind of sort of grainy brown bread crusty sort of thing. So that's interesting. On top of that, you can, if you go into the middle third of your palate, you can feel that the breadiness kind of thickens up a wee bit. If you go onto the front half, of that middle third of your palate, you can feel a few woody and slightly nutty flavours coming out as part of the backbone there as well. But yeah, backbone of this beer, definitely a kind of wholemeal, actually maybe even rye bready type base. This one, it's got a wee bit of a more kind of prominent graininess to it, like a rye bread. So yeah, there is a big brown bready backbone to this one, and on the front half of that middle third of your palate, you do get a bit of a woody, nutty undertone to this one. So that's quite interesting. But yeah, if you move into that centre part of your palate, you can feel there's a little bit more of a kind of fluffy, bready type note sitting on top of that. So I really, really like that. But in terms of the brown sugary elements to this one, they kind of just sit on top of that, and it's actually a lot sweeter. The brown sugary notes that you get out of this one are a lot brighter and a lot sweeter than the aroma would make you think, which is interesting too. So yeah, when you take the beer in, when you first take it in, you certainly do get an element of that more treacle molasses type thing out of this one. But then, as you let the middle of the palate just kind of, you know, mature a little bit and just kind of show its head a little bit more, it really sweetens up a little bit. So sitting on top of that kind of more airy brown bready layer, I would say that that brown bready layer as well, that comes across as nice and kind of smooth on top of that. But then you get a kind of oval, a kind of circle of a big oily brown sugary element coming out of the beer. So right in the dead centre of the palate, that's where you can feel the highest concentration of those big treacly molasses brown sugars in there. So you can feel that right in the middle of the thing there. But as you move further out from that, you can feel it does become a little bit more kind of bright and caramelly in a sense. It's a nice oily but still quite sweet caramel. Then as you move out towards the extremities of that middle third of your palate, you certainly get a little bit more of a kind of biscuity, McVitie's digestive biscuity cookie type thing coming out of this one. So you can feel that kind of expanding out of the beer as well. I would say with this beer, it has got the thing that's interesting about this one is that the further you've got all these flavours developing in there, and you will notice with this beer that the further you go into the aftertaste, you do start to feel underneath the brown sugar, you can feel a bit of a kind of more that yeasty bready layer kind of comes out a little bit more. It sort of thickens up a wee bit, and pardon me, it almost gives you a bit of a kind of slight, I think it does give you a little touch of a sort of leathery flavour. I always find it interesting to talk about leathery flavours in beer because that's something that I would always more associate with whiskey. But yeah, I do think you get a wee bit of a kind of more leathery flavour coming out of this one, which is quite interesting. But yeah, the way that everything goes in this beer goes together in this beer is quite nice actually. So yeah, in a lot of ways it's quite a straight shooting. It's quite a straight shooting quadruple, this one. It doesn't feel too heavy and too complex, but it's well done. But as I say, it just leans a little bit differently. The brown sugars come across a wee bit differently in this one, a wee bit more highly kind of oil, they come across as being a little bit more highly kind of treacleized and stuff like this. So yeah, maybe a slightly longer boil in this one, I'm not 100% sure, but it works out. It certainly does work out quite well in this. I like what this beer is trying to do, but I think that covers the middle third of the palate quite succinctly in this one, and this is where the majority of the complexity in the beer is, of course. But yeah, border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a nice little bit of a kind of bready build up in there and a wee bit of bread crust, and then the back third of your palate you can feel the sort of smooth, you can feel a little bit of the kind of grainy breadiness sitting in there, and then the yeastiness, of course, that kind of more airy yeastiness sits on top of that. But you've got a slightly thicker part at the bottom, but then on top of the thicker part you can feel it's a little bit lighter and more airy, so the yeast is playing a big role on that back third of your palate. So if you start at the back third of your palate and come further forward, as I usually say, you can feel the flavour is a bit taller there, but then it condenses down going forward, and then the middle third of your palate, the flavours are quite kind of squished together in a sense. So yeah, I do like how the beer goes about its business in that sense. The malty and yeasty side of things in this one go together really quite nicely. But yeah, the hoppy side of things then, this is kind of what you'd expect. At the back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of a smoother earthiness in there. As you move further forward, it develops a little bit of a herbal quality, and then as you move towards the kind of front corners of the palate, it's got a little bit of a brighter floral aromatic sort of thing. Then round the front curve of the tongue, it's brighter and more grassy, a little bit lighter and a bit more grassy in a sense. So yeah, I like how the beer goes about its business from that side of things. It's a typical green component for it's a typical green component for a quadruple, and like I say, it is probably one of the more noble type hosts. Slovenian Styrian Goldings, Czech Žatec, Sats, or one of the Hallertau, the Tettnangers, something like this, or Northern Brewer, of course. So I think something along these lines in this one. But yeah, the green component is pretty standard for this one. This is not, the quadruples are not the most hop forward of beers, of course, we need to remember that. But let's focus on the front third of the palate and the fruity elements of the beer. But yeah, that front third of your palate then. So, border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a little bit of a bready build up in there, a nice kind of bread crusty quality, which I think works really nicely. And then the base of that front third of your palate, you can feel a little bit of the kind of almost rye bready sort of thing, and a bit of the smoother kind of more yeasty element to the beer as well. They're forming the base. But if you go to the back third of your palate, it certainly comes across as being a little bit more kind of cakey and things like that. There is an element of a kind of fruit cakey element to this beer, which I think works really nicely. But sitting on top of that, of course, you can feel there is a wee touch of that raisiny sharpness in there. To be clear about raisins, I mean, you know, sort of dark purple grapes. I've had this question before, but underneath that you get a little bit more of a kind of dried pruny note to this, a dried plum, but you also get some really nice kind of sultana elements there. So the back half of that front third of your palate is certainly a more dried fruit flavour. So you've got the cakey element in there, you've got sultanas, a bit of prune, and then a wee bit of a sharper raisiny quality sitting on top of that. But as you move further forward, the sultana flavours really push forward a little bit, and then as you move into that front half of the front third of your palate, you'll get a wee bit of a kind of figgy, black curranty type thing, and just a wee bit of a more blackberry type aroma out of this one, which I can certainly appreciate. So the fruity side of this beer really is quite nice and dry, woody and cakey in a sense. So I really enjoy that with this beer. I think it works out really nicely. So thumbs up to Mathildedalin Kyläpanimo for this. This is an interesting quadruple, and it's nice to see how it evolves on the palate, of course. But yeah, quite a different vibe to it. It really does remind me a little bit of the Castile Donker. In a way, which it's not specifically a quadruple. That one is like a Belgian dark strong ale, and that I think reflects with this beer. For me, it's not. It feels that this beer just has a little bit of a different vibe to it from other quadruples, but it is very, very nice. And remember, these beers are going to vary from brewery to brewery, of course. But yeah, I think this one has turned out pretty damn nicely, so thumbs up to them. Let's round off the review with the mouthfeel then. So the mouthfeel for me, what can we say? I think it's fair to say this one kind of sits at the bottom end of the full-bodied spectrum for me. The carbonation is quite smooth. It does have a bit of slickness and a bit of oiliness to it. I would say that the carbonation in this one is a bit less active than I've come across in some other Belgian type quadruples, and the beer also feels a little bit cleaner, as I say, because of the water, because of the finished water obviously being very high quality. So yeah, this one feels a little bit different, a little bit slicker and a bit more kind of oily in a sense, and very clean. So that's definitely worth pointing out in this one. So yeah, it's quite interesting how that goes together. But yeah, on the rest of the mouthfeel then, in terms of hoppy bitterness and stuff, I think this one's a kind of standard 15, maybe 20 IBUs at most. There's a little bit of bitterness from the grainy part of the beer, there's a little bit of bitterness from the hops, but you've also got a nice kind of smooth bready and you know, the hoppy bitterness, first off, isn't going to blow the head off you, 15-20 IBUs, but the malty and yeasty side of things, it's got a nice bit of smoothness to it, it's got a good little touch of graininess, but then it's kind of dominated by these kind of nice, slightly toasty brown sugars, which is interesting. But it comes across as more like a kind of, it's a more sort of savoury kind of sweetness that you get out of this beer. It reminds me a little bit of the kanelbullar that we get here in Sweden, the cinnamon buns. It's kind of a little bit like that, except, you know, more caramelly and brown sugary, of course. But yeah, you do get a wee bit of a kind of cakey vibe out of this one, and the fruits for me are nice and oily, but at the same time they've got that kind of you know, dried fruity type vibe to them. But like I say, I really like this beer. I have enjoyed this one, and it certainly would make me quite curious to try some of their other ones. I like the kind of dry, I like it when you get a quadruple that's got a bit more of a kind of dried fruity character to it, and I like the brightness of the brown sugars in here. I like how they've got that balance between it being more kind of treacly and molassesy to some extent, but then the brown sugars come across as really bright. So this one, it has all the flavours you'd expect of a quadruple, but it just, they just come out slightly differently. I think that's a fair thing to say about this one. But yeah, interesting. Definitely cool to review my first Finnish quadruple, and I think we should finish up the review there then. But yeah, this was interesting. So yeah, this one was the Fredrik, a 10% Belgian-style quadruple from Mathildedalin Kyläpanimo. in the southwest of Finland, a little village called Mathildedalin, a kind of summer village if you like. But yeah, I guess we can leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Mathildedalin Kyläpanimo. If you do have any recommendations for Finnish breweries brewing quadruples and triples and Belgian type beers, I would be very interested to hear those. Any Finnish brewery recommendations, of course, are welcomed, because I can ask Riku about those and see if we can get them. But yeah, really cool to review my first Finnish quadruple. So thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Mathildedalin Kyläpanimo's social media, and we'll catch you guys on the next review. Slange, skål, cheers, kippis and kitos.